Well, the questions aren't all serious, I promise you. I mean, I like to keep it light and airy. So I did do a little bit of research, and I'm fascinated to know that you are an attorney
I am.
in New York City. We feel very fancy to have
Yeah.
somebody from New
I
York.
always think of, it's probably really dating me, but there used to be this old El Paso salsa commercial where these cowboys were sitting around the fire eating beans, I guess, and they said something about this salsa, you know, it's not made in New York City. I can't remember how it went, but I always
That's exactly it.
says New York City in that way. I'm like, wow, yeah.
Well,
Like
but then
cowboys.
then you've got, you know, your cohort in Nashville. So
Yeah, no.
that,
It was not, you know, a real likely match, but we met on the
no.
internet. We met on the Rowan board.
Okay, so I guess that's where I was going to start to get you to talk about that a little bit, because it is sort of unusual for a Nashvilleian in a New York City attorney to meet online. You know, it sounds like some kind of online dating story that you would read.
It was totally like online dating in that we had, you know, we started our blog before we met each other in person, and we actually
So you each had your own individual blogs?
No, we met on the Rowan chat board, and this was before Ravelry, before blogs. And then while we were on the Rowan chat board, which was just like, you know, one of those old school chat rooms on the internet that they used to have, and it was sponsored by Rowan magazine, and you had to be a subscriber to get into the chat room. So you ended up sitting there with a lot of British women, because Rowan is a British brand.
Mm-hmm.
And Anne and I noticed each other because we were not British. At some point, you know, we started emailing each other, like, and I don't know if you were on the internet back in the early 2000s, but it was kind of a big deal to give somebody your real email address.
Yes.
And like, when I met a lot of British knitters on that chat board, and some of them would come through to New York, and I remember I'd be saying to my husband, oh, I'm gonna go meet this woman from, you know, from London, and he was like, well, call me when you get there, you know, like he was worried that I was meeting a stranger that I met on the internet.
Yes.
And Shane was one of those strangers.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, the fun thing
So
that I
what
would
started
like
the
to tell,
collaboration?
what?
I mean, did the collaboration just sort of organically grow between you, and you decided,
It
well,
was
let's
just a
do it?
lark. It was just a lark. A lot of our British friends on the chat board had started knitting blogs because they were the new greatest thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of like, why would anybody do that? Who cares? Let's just chat on the chat board. Why would anybody want to read what I'm knitting? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like a journal online about that. And then like 6 months later, we said, oh, let's do it. Let's do it just you and me, and we'll write letters to each other. And so
Mm-hmm.
we started it, and like we thought about the name for 5 seconds, and we started without thinking about it. And it was a really fun thing for a really long time. It still is. It's, you know, we still have the same, you know, address on the internet that we had when we first started.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's evolved a lot in, what is it now, almost 17 years. But
Wow.
I eventually did meet Anne, but only after we had signed a deal to write our first book with Random House. And we were
No
like, well,
kidding.
we better meet each other and see, you know, like maybe she's really weird or something. Like, this is both of us thinking this, right? And I mean, maybe we are really weird, but it did work out. And
Well, yes, you were going to go
it's
into a
been
business
just
transaction.
it's such a great part of life, you know, like it's been a fun thing for, I hope for her too, but for me, it's really been fun. Like one thing is I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, and then I moved to New York, and I've been in New York for way more than half my life at this point. And I had never really been to the South. I hadn't even been to Atlanta, you know, like I had not gone to the South. I just hadn't had anything in my life that took me there. So now I'm like, I feel like I'm an honorary Nashvilleian, you know, because I'm there a lot. and
Mm-hmm.
And I've really seen it change in the time that I've known Anne.
Was it a culture shock for you a little bit? Just a
Um,
slower pace, I suppose, from New York City to.
I mean, I think Nashville, especially today, has more in common with New York than things that are different. You know,
exactly true. Yeah.
I mean, it's been enormously helpful to see the South through Anne's eyes because she was born in Birmingham, and when she was just a little kid, her family moved to Nashville, so she's a real Nashvilleian. And you know, like I don't want to, you know, I don't want this to sound wrong, but like if you're not from the South, you have certain mindset about what the South is. And
no,
and
you know,
you never heard that before?
No, yes, I have.
And Anne just blew that all out of the water for me. You know, like I see the South through her eyes, and I think
They're a bunch of hillbillies, right? You know,
it's a very interesting, rich place with delicious food. I'll tell you that. And
lots of cholesterol issues. Yes,
I have like, you know, favorite places, and you know, it's been a really enriching thing for me. And Anne had spent part of her young adulthood in New York. So in some ways, like we'll be in New York doing something and I'll get lost and Anne will know the way. So it's a little bit unfair because I still can't drive around Nashville without my navigation on. But
I don't think I could either, and I live 3 hours away.
I still don't really have a good grasp on what's north, south, east, and west in Nashville. So I just drive.
Well, but it isn't fascinating that you talk about the Brits and the New Yorkers and the Tennesseans, but we're all doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
We all love the same thing, and that's the process of putting one piece of string, you know, around.
I know, it's amazing.
Device and going. So
it's really hard for me to explain it to people that don't knit, like
no,
what we do, and that we can spend full time doing this, just talking about knitting, you know.
Yes, that is true. I mean, it does get to me sometimes when I make shop model after shop model after shop model, of course, right? So
yeah,
but then you just have to take time to bring out that most ridiculous sock yarn that you bought somewhere on a whim and make a funny pair of socks, and then everything's right.
For me, if I get tired of knitting, you know, or writing about knitting for 5 minutes, I'll just go on Instagram and look at some, you know, and somebody will be making something amazing, and I'll just have to like be totally inspired by that, you know, like it's endless. And like when we first wrote our first books, we were thinking, well, this could be like, you know, you have a best friend and you start dating and all of a sudden you've ruined, you know, your relationship falls apart and you're no longer best friends anymore. And what did you do? Right. Like, and we thought what that could happen to us in knitting, you know, like it's our favorite hobby. And if we marry it and it becomes our job, maybe we'll hate it, you know, like.
That was on the top of my thoughts when I opened the store. You know, am I going to get just sick of it? Right.
Yeah. And it's
not
what
so
I
far.
think is amazing is I get tired sometimes of like deadlines and, you know, we write this little series of books now called the MDK Field Guides.
Oh, we have them.
Well, that's how we know each other, Cristi.
Yes. I show everybody those.
But, oh, I happen to have one I could just show. This is the latest one. It's called Refresh.
Yes. And I think, well, real quickly,
these little beauties, they're so beautiful, but they are just one deadline after another for Kay Gardner and Anne Shane. Because as soon as, you know, while one is coming out, another one is going to the printer, and the one after that, we're like getting the samples made for it. So, you know, every once in a while that leads to some fatigue. But at the end of a day of writing about knitting and stressing about book deadlines about knitting and things, what do I want to do? Knit.
Yes.
I just would like to put my feet up and knit for a while. And
yes, it's like I want to take the time for myself.
I have never not wanted to knit, so I think that's good. I definitely, when I was practicing law, I couldn't like, this will date me again, but I don't care. When I was like a young lawyer in a prosecutor's office in New York, there was this hit show on TV called LA Law.
Oh, yes.
And like everybody would say to me, you know, don't you watch that show? It's just about like what you're doing. And, you know, and I would be like, the last thing I want to do having my relaxation time is some kind of drama about courtrooms and evidence, and like that was just like a trigger for me for stress. But I don't feel
But
that
you
way.
know that I find that fascinating. In fact, one of my questions, because I'm now going to ask you questions that aren't about knitting, just to make you human. You know, you're not just a super awesome knitter, but also human. So one of my questions was, what's the most bizarre case you ever tried? If you want to talk about that.
I worked for the United States Attorney in New York for 12 years, and I was on the civil side. So I only very occasionally would be prosecuting anybody for a crime. And I was mostly defending the United States of America.
Oh, okay.
And so it was everything from, it was always civil cases. It was everything from, we had a case against the entire Gambino organized crime family.
Oh, wow.
And so that had its own bizarre things about it. It was a civil case, but it was something called, it was a civil racketeering case.
Like the RICO laws?
It was a civil RICO case. And it was 7 attorneys, of which I was the only woman, which was fun.
Look, guys, we can say we know somebody that fought the mafia.
I did, but what was funny and weird about it was like I in criminal cases, you know, they try these people and they never speak to them, you know, because they're the defendant. They don't get but it was a civil case, so we got to take their depositions. So, you know, I'd be sitting across the table from, you know, a nice looking old grandpa, and he was a capo in the
Vic the Ripper or somebody like that.
Crime family. And one of them, I can't remember what happened, but somebody else came to take the second part of his deposition instead of me. And he said to them, "Where's that nice Miss Gardner?"
No. You know, you're a writer, so I would imagine that in your mind you're thinking, what a great character for a book if I could write a piece of fiction.
It was interesting, but it was also much more boring than you would think. Like, you know, it was, litigation is really like, I don't know. It's fine tooth comb. It's a lot of boring stuff in addition to the interesting stuff. But like the cases that I loved were like, I think I'm kind of a born defense attorney, so I loved like medical malpractice cases.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we were always representing the Veterans Administration, because that's a federal entity that has hospitals in our district.
Thank you for that.
And I love those cases. Like, nobody else wanted them, but I liked them because you would get to have an expert witness and you'd learn everything about, you know, what went wrong. And I like that.
Just like everybody thinks also that running a yarn shop is very glamorous and doesn't have very a lot of minutia involved.
Yeah, like people think that you're just sitting there knitting all day. It's really, really relaxing. And I mean, you enjoy it though. Like,
oh yeah. Absolutely. So I'm going to guide you to the next question, is that from those books that you guys had and from your vlog, what was your next step? I mean, where did that go next? Was it this? Was it the website? What was it? And by the way, you guys, if you haven't been to their website, you should definitely go there and do your research.
MasonDixonKnitting.com.
Yes, and what we've been talking to you, the ones that I've spoken to lately about this, is what the way these guys are different is they present to us not just knitting, not just yarn, but a lifestyle. Okay, so if you don't get their newsletters, you completely need to sign up for that. They have something called snippets. They also have another newsletter that you can get, and every day you can get an article. It's not necessarily about knitting. It could be about what music you listen to on Sunday after. That's one of my favorite ones. It's a Lazy Sunday Post.
Yeah.
So you can, because we're not just knitters. We're made more of K1, P1, you know, knit two together. There's more to us than that. There's music, there's travel, there's family, there's all that stuff. And this is what these people do very well, and it is a very niche thing, and it is beautiful.
That's you're so good, Cristi. I mean, I love that you've noticed that about it, because I think some people come to us like we do have a daily website, and if you don't want to come to us every day because of life, we do have this email that you can get every Saturday morning that we call snippets, where we present you with the list of everything that happened in the week, and you can sort of pick and choose the ones that are interesting to you. And so, like, for our how-to information, Anne and I are both like veteran workhorse knitters. We've been knitting for a combined 50 years plus, but we're not experts, and we don't even really want to be. We just knit because we think it's fun, and we're not intimidated by much in knitting, but we're not teachers of knitting. So we get, one of the things, you said, what happened next? What happened next is we just lived our lives, and we blogged when we felt like it. And different things happened, as life will happen. My husband died, and this is 11 years ago. He was very young to die. And, so during that whole period, we kept the blog going, but it was just whenever we felt like it. Like, I would actually not know that Anne had posted a blog, like she would just go on and post, or I would go on and post, and sometimes it'd be 2 weeks, sometimes it'd be a month. And we had this persistent thought, and it relates to what you're saying about knitting being a lifestyle, that, in the minds of the general public, knitting is this weird little thing that a few people do. Mm-hmm. And whereas knitters, we know so many knitters, and for us and for most of the knitters we know, knitting is a really important part of this very rich tapestry of your life.
Right.
It's very much like, our personal hero is Julia Child. Before Julia Child, and a few people like her, cooking was something that you did because you had to do it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't anything to be celebrated. Like, everybody had one cookbook, and they used it to look up recipes, and they made the things. And cookbooks were not, Julia Child just changed all that, because she made cooking into something that you did because you loved it. And, and she was the mother of all those beautiful cookbooks that are still being produced, that are just full of gorgeous photography and inspiration.
Don't forget, she was also a spy, which is cool.
That was another cool thing about her. She was a badass.
Yeah, no.
Here's a sneak preview. Julia's going to be on on Knit to This on Saturday.
Cool.
It's going to be an appearance by her. But she's never far from our thoughts, because when we wrote our first knitting books in 2004 and 5 and 6, we wanted our knitting books to be a little bit like what Julia's first cookbook was, kind of like this is something different. It's not just a recipe book. It's about knitting. It's about life. And so we still feel that way. And all these years were ticking by, and we were blogging and knitting, and we thought, why are there all these gorgeous websites for other interests in life? Mm-hmm. And there isn't a daily website. Like, there's a site that really inspired us for what Mason Dixon Knitting is now, is a site called Food 52.
Oh, okay, cool.
And
write that down, y'all.
That's a cooking site, and it actually is owned and run by 2 women. No coincidence that we like that about it. And it's full of beautiful writing, beautiful photography, and it not only updates every day. If you refresh it after you've been on the site for about a half an hour, there's something new. I mean, wow. We can only hope that Mason Dixon Knitting would be like that someday, but we thought, why do cooks have this, and why don't knitters have this? Mm-hmm. And that just evolved into.
How did you come up with a name for a field guide?
It was partly, Anne used to work in book publishing, and the most important thing about the field guides initially was the size of the book.
Okay, yes.
We saw what was happening to big books, like our first books, like the Ravelry kind of brought an end to those books that have 30 patterns in them. Like, there's still a few of them, but before Ravelry, there used to be maybe dozens of those in a year would be published, and now it's like a dozen. You know, it's much, much lower. And I think it's because knitters don't want to consume patterns in that way anymore. The individual pattern is, they can just purchase the one thing that they want to knit. And we love that. We get that. We like Ravelry. But we thought that it was a loss to the world, that, you know, these knitting books that were kind of a collection of related things, that we didn't want to see that go. And so we tried to figure out a way that it would be like a small enough book that you didn't feel overwhelmed by it, and would fit in your knitting bag,
portable,
and that would be really beautiful. Like this is all, a lot of this comes from Anne and her love of books. I mean, I love books, but Anne really loves books. And at the same time as we were launching the new daily website of Mason Dixon Knitting, you know, and we have contributors now. It's not just me and Anne talking to each other anymore. Like, we are really pleased that in the 4 or 5 years that we've been doing this, almost everybody that we've asked has said yes when we say, would you like to write for us? So we've got Patty Lyons and Kate Atherley and Jillian Moreno, and they write for us regularly, and they all have they all have something really great to offer. So
Patty Lyons is a wealth anyway, a wealth of information.
Yeah. So, and then we don't have to worry about our own shortcomings in the how-to department. We just have other people bring that to us and to our readers. But the books, you know, and at the same time we were launching the daily website, we heard that Melanie Fallick, whose name you don't know, but whose work you do definitely know, is she was a longtime editor at Abrams, which is an illustrated book publisher. And she, 25 years ago, wrote a book called Knitting in America. That's her own book. And she just became kind of a legendary editor of almost every really beautiful knitting book except ours was edited by Melanie Fallick. So we heard that she was leaving Abrams, and she was pursuing, she had a book she wanted to write, and she wanted to have a different lifestyle. So we kind of knew her slightly, and we just called her up, and I drove up to Beacon, New York, where she lives, which is about an hour and a half from New York City. And we just said, Melanie, we don't know what we want to do, but we want to do it with you, you know, like, we want your beauty.
Right.
And within a short time, we had figured out that we wanted to publish these little books. So, and Melanie is the creative director of them. She's the reason they look beautiful. So we just write the stuff and recruit the designers. Each one is a different designer.
Someone just said she met Melanie when she published her first book in Raleigh.
Wow. So you know, that's a long time ago. Melanie hasn't aged either, so that's kind of an annoying thing about her.
We had somebody walk in, sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
So we're open, but so anyway. Now, like, I'm going to go to stuff that I know that the knitters want to know. First of all, what you're wearing right now.
This is a shake rag top. It's from Field Guide number 6, Transparency. I hope I don't do anything inappropriate, but you can kind of see that it's a little bit transparent.
Yes.
Those stripes are just, some of the stripes are the yarn held single and some are held double.
Right.
So,
and the yarn looks like a linen blend of some kind, maybe.
It's a linen and cashmere blend called Sylph.
Oh yes, you know about that one.
It's from Jade Safar, Mongolia. We're re-yarning it for this summer season to a yarn. I don't know. Do you carry Rowan in your shop?
We have felted tweed, and we have which I need to reorder because I heart this book very much. Double heart.
That book moved some felted tweed.
Yes, it did. And I have the pattern printed, but I haven't done it yet. It's the dots. I want to do the dots scarf, the tubular scarf.
Oh yeah, I had a blast with that.
We have the kid silk case. That's what the other thing I was thinking of. Kid silk and felted tweed. But You know,
But we're re-yarning this. We're going to knit a new sample in one of Rowan's 4-ply cotton yarns called Summer Light 4-ply.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
We needed something that was like, the cashmere is very light, but in the true summer, you can't even wear cashmere, you know.
Mm-mm.
And
it's hot here.
And also, frankly, we wanted to have a more affordable version of it because it's just such a great, you know, everyday top. And, you know, in cashmere, it's just kind of pricey. So in cotton, it's a bargain.
Yes. Now, here leads to my next question that's obviously not about Mason Dixon, but I ask people, if you're on a deserted island, and you could only bring one yarn with you, what would it be?
I mean, it would have to be felted tweed right now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we've been knitting with felted tweed since felted tweed was a young yarn. You know, it's.
Got it here first, guys. Felted tweed. We're gonna need to reorder that. And then also, what are your favorite needles? I mean, I realize that you use different needles for different things. But when you're just going to cast on a swatch and you're thinking about it, what does your hand go to?
I have this interchangeable set. I was very late to come to the interchangeable world, and because I'm not very organized, and I was worried correctly that I would, you know, lose the number 5s, and then the whole set would be busted. But I have this interchangeable set called Tulips, and they're bamboo interchangeables from Japan.
Okay.
Those are just a real sweet ride on your needles. They swivel, so it's only when you start to use an interchangeable or a needle where the head of the needle swivels that you realize that it's taking all this weight off of your wrists. So I love them.
I got a pair of something like that in Germany, but the brand name was in German, and so I never saw them again. But anyway, so I'm gonna go to, since it's 1:30 now, guys. If you have a question, please type it into the group chat. If I don't have your question already here to my left on the iPad, so I'm going to ask a few questions that we have.
Okay, I'm just going to excuse myself for like 2 seconds because I'm going to go grab something that I should have shown you. And so that you don't see my sweatpants, I'm going to stop my video.
We wouldn't mind. You're back. Oh, I know it. I love it. Look at that, guys.
So this is from Field Guide 13.
Yeah.
So this is Kay Fassett's coins motif, which is like one of the simplest motifs in that book. And
yes.
I did it in scarves and pillows. And there's a blanket pattern in there that has a whole bunch of his different stitch patterns, but I did it all in the coins.
That is, you know, that's what made me want to buy these books when I saw this post.
Yeah, I mean, I just love this thing. And so here's a question that sometimes people ask me, so I will answer it because I love to answer it, is what is it like to work with Kay Fassett? For those who don't know him or much about him, he's like in his early 80s now, although you wouldn't really know it. And he's just an amazing artist. He's also one of the most movie star handsome people that I've ever met, which I know that's a superficial thing, but it's just kind of, there's a glamour to him that's really wonderful. But he's been a Rowan designer since before Rowan was a company. He met the founder of Rowan, I can't remember, through some kind of happenstance. I think maybe at a fiber festival or something. And he's had designs in every issue of Rowan magazine, which is now like 64 issues.
Wow.
And his work is wildly colorful, and he's a painter. He does, if you're a quilter, you also know him because he designs all these beautiful quilting fabrics. He's designed just scores of gorgeous needlepoint canvases. He's had a one-man show at the Victoria and Albert Museum. He lives in Britain, although he's from California.
Okay.
And it's very, if you ever get a chance to hear him speak, just go, even if you don't think you're interested, because he will just make you feel so validated in that it's fulfilling to make things with your hands. And
Mm-hmm.
he is a person without any doubts. So working with him is really fun because he just, you kind of give him the idea of, you know, you talk with him briefly. He doesn't have a lot of patience. So it's, you know, you talk with him briefly.
That is something I have heard, yes.
And he's like, okay, got it. And then like literally before you can really expect it, you get back swatches, and they're incredible. And so it's very much of a delight to work with him. So we hope we get to do it again.
Well, that leads to another one of my questions, and before I promise you guys will get to yours, but how do you decide who you're going to highlight? I mean, do you have a running list of people you've already asked? Do you just love someone and you go for it and you ask them, can we put your work in one of these books? How does that go for you?
It's very, I can't say there's any real method to our madness, but, you know, to be completely honest, you know, 5 years ago when we started asking people, it was kind of like, do we think they'll say yes? You know, like, and because we were kind of selling them a pig and a poke, you know, we were just saying, oh, we're going to do these books. They're going to be really beautiful, but we didn't have anything to really show them. And what helped us a lot was Melanie, because Melanie has published, you know, gorgeous books by some of these people. That's how we got Nora gone was, you know, we said, Melanie, do you think Nora would want to do something with us? And she said, well, just ask her. And it's the same with Cave. Melanie edited Cave's autobiography. She edited several of his, he has these gorgeous, they're still in print, these beautiful books that just are stitch dictionaries of all of his color work motifs.
Wow.
So she edited those. So she knew him very well. And she said, you know, he's coming to town. Do you want to meet him? And he was actually coming to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which is where one of his collaborators, Liza Pryor Lucy, lives. And Melanie said, I'm going to go down and see him in Pennsylvania. Kay, do you want to go with me? And I was like, yeah, but we can't leave Anne out of this. So Anne flew to Newark, and we picked her up at Newark Airport, and she flew back that night. But that was how much she wanted to spend the day with Kate Fassett. And it was really a highlight of my life. But yeah, we do think about things like we wouldn't want to have 2 field guides in a row that were cables. You know, so we think about who's a designer that, like, after the Nora field guide, we wouldn't have done somebody who was a cable designer, you know, for whom that was like a big signature.
Right.
Because we want them to have like a variety to them.
And then, yeah, the log cabin book is a representation, I think, of what you're talking about. That's field guide number 4. Okay.
Yeah,
4.
That one has this rather underappreciated designer, Kay Gardner, in it. That's the only time that one of us has designed for a field guide, but it's like, you know, I love a log cabin. So,
and you guys, if you want, we only have we just started getting these, so the 13 and 14. If you want to go and get any of those back copies, they still have those on their website, and you can go and get those.
Yeah.
So Mason,
they never get old to us.
So let's go with this
we will
question.
always carry all of them.
Ann Fairhurst asked, where is the first place you will travel when you feel safe from COVID-19?
Well, you should probably ask the first place after Nashville, because I know I'll be going to Nashville immediately. You know, we have retreats. We have this retreat in Swanee, Tennessee, every June. And so that's coming up pretty soon. And of course we had to cancel it. And it just kills us. You know, it's 100 knitters on the mountain, and it just kills me that we can't do that this year. But beyond that, I mean, I have a beloved godson in his 20s who's getting married in France in October, and I'm hoping I get to go for that, but it doesn't seem super likely, does it?
I mean,
but that will be, his mom is one of my best and oldest friends, and she moved to France a long time ago, and so that's probably where I'll go as soon as.
Well, if I could go anywhere after France would be a good place to start. You know,
They have some excellent things there.
let's see. Paige asks, living so far apart from each other, what were and are the hurdles you all had to overcome in creating and developing your business? And what were the upsides?
I think because of the way we evolved, initially that it was just this blogging whenever you feel like it thing. We just got used to writing to each other as that was our main form of communication. And it's a joke, and it's also kind of true that sometimes we'll be in the same room together and I'll send her an email, like it'll just be like, I want her to have this and remember it, so I'll send her an email. And so we send each other just hundreds of emails and texts and direct messages, and it's just the way we communicate. When we were writing the books, we got together in person and we did a lot of phone. Now, of course, we run a business together, so we talk to each other every day, and it's a hurdle right now because of the fact that Anne's in Nashville, our warehouse is in Nashville, our employees are in Nashville. It seems the burden of the situation falls more on her than on me. I'm just up here, free floating in New York.
Doing Zoom interviews for little yarn shops in Tennessee.
I feel like one function that is handy about me living in New York is how many people come through New York that we have some kind of interest in meeting. So I am the part of the operation that has, Anne says this in a kind of teasing way, that my job is having coffee.
Yeah, I was about to say hospitality director for Mason.
I have coffee with, with a lot of people that come through New York, because you can't beat in person, like we can all work remotely, and we've done field guides with people, like field guide number 5, sequences, is with Cecilia Campo Chiaro, who lives in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And, the whole field guide happens without us ever getting together in person. But when we can get together in person, it's like things explode. Everybody has ideas, you accomplish a lot more face to face.
That's exactly right. And that's why I miss everybody so much, right now. They're staying home and staying safe, and that's great.
Well, and think about how much of knitting is showing somebody something.
Right.
Like I can't wait to be in my local yarn shop, just.
Oh, what is yours? That's a good question.
Oh, my local yarn shop is called Knitty City. It's on 79th Street and Amsterdam Avenue.
I haven't had the chance to go, but Lauren, who you saw earlier, she has been and sings its praises.
Yeah, it's a crazy shop. It's in a wonderful way. It's so packed with stuff and with people. But the owner, Pearl Chin, is just an incredible person, and she's really.
We're very eclectic here too, I think. But you'll have to ask everybody else.
It's just fun to come into a shop where there's so much to look at,
Also, this is from Paige, but it's because we've been talking knitting the whole time. I feel like I should include this because we don't want to leave them out. And it's in my Hook and Needle is the name of my business. So she says, I'm a new knitter and a lifelong crocheter. And by the way, you should know she is one hell of a crocheter. I mean, the most amazing stuff I've ever seen. So anyway, she says, I've just discovered you due to this Zoom meeting, so forgive me for not having enough time to explore your site before asking this question. So, do you ever include crocheting? I'm excited about exploring and discovering Mason Dixon Knitting. That's what.
We have a little bit about crochet on the site because, so many of our contributors do both. We definitely don't have any how-to about crochet. I hope that we get there because I really love it. I know enough crochet to,
dangerous.
to be a little bit reckless and dangerous. No, one of the things I think about crochet is a long time ago, I made a baby sweater, a knitted baby sweater. And then it was an old pattern, and the pattern just said to, I can't remember what it was I was doing with crochet, but it said, make an edging with buttonholes in it with single crochet. And I was like, well, I don't know how to crochet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, how hard could it be? I'm just going to do what I think I should do. And as I was doing it, I was like, it felt like I had done this before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I know how to do this? And
Yep.
I really think, in a past life, I probably did crochet, but I did take a class. I'm not very good at taking classes in knitting, mostly because I don't like where they have them. I really hate a hotel conference room.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But
you need to have it take these big conferences to little yarn shops, or at least throw down carpets and lamps in those conference rooms to make it a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, but I took a class at Nitty City years ago because I was dying to learn how to make a granny square blanket, and so I did learn how to make granny squares. But I have an arrangement with one of our contributors. Her name is Liz Kaplan. So if you go on Mason Dixon Knitting and you click on the contributors page, you'll see her picture, and through that, if you click on her picture, this article will come up. She wrote an article about why she crochets and what she loves about it. And I have this long running kind of swap going with Liz Kaplan because, there's only so many hours in the day, and I generally am supposed to be knitting, during those crafting times.
Although you did say Sunday that you like to keep a little portion of your sock yarn, as a memory of what you made with it too. Is that what you're doing?
Well, and I always imagine I'm going to do something great with all those little scraps one day, some great art project. But anyway, once in a while I'll see something on the internet that's crochet, and I'll go like, I have to have that. And I'll work out a deal with Liz Kaplan, and she will do it. And one time I knit her a sweater. I can't remember what all the swaps have been. I think sometimes she just makes it for me. But then I have the thing that I wanted, and I didn't have to, I guess I was denied the pleasure of making it, but I didn't have to spend that time that I'm supposed to be knitting doing that. I have a lot. I would do almost any needlecraft if I could. Like, I'm really into Alabama Channon, which is just go to her website, alabamachannon.com. You'll see a lot of super expensive handmade clothing.
Yes.
Every stitch by hand. But she also sells the materials and the kits. And if you want to get your own materials, you just get her books, and she teaches you how to do everything. And
yes, I have heard of her actually.
She's based in Florence, Alabama. And I'm like a member of her cult. And so I spend a lot of my, especially my weekend time, just sitting there doing a running stitch, making my Alabama Channon clothing.
That goes to I originally have 10 random questions. So that goes to one of our random questions, which is, do you have any collections other than yarn?
Collections?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't we all?
Yes, but something's unique. I interviewed my first guy, and he told me he had all these Christmas villages everywhere. And so that was fascinating.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, mine is very mundane, but I think quite relatable. I love these jam jars, Bonne Maman, with the little gingham tops.
Oh, yes.
So the jam is delicious. And then you have these beautiful jars that have a red and white checkered top. And they're just so handy. And I just collect them, I must say. And Costco recently came out with a Costco size of them. So it's like a giant one, but it still has the lid. And
how long does it take you to eat that much jam, though?
Somebody gave me a recipe for a cake that calls for a cup of jam. So
okay,
I'm going to go through it. I'm going to have that jar empty in no time.
I can just see it now with.
I'm trying to think there are definitely other things that I collect, but they tend to be needlework related for sure. Like I love old tools and funny things like that. but
That's
I'm
neat.
also, one of my hobbies is this organizing method that's called by Marie Kondo.
Which sort of goes against collecting things, doesn't it?
It does. Well, I mean, that's kind of a bad rap against her, because she's not actually ever advocating that you get rid of anything. She's just asking that that the things you do surround yourself with be things that you really love.
Love, and yes. I always say place, purpose.
Joy. Yes. And when you look at all this stuff that you have with that, through that lens of, is it either useful to you in some way? Like, you know, your frying pan probably doesn't spark joy, but you're not going to get rid of your frying pan. But
I don't know, I love to cook. So
tchotchkes of life, and including clothing, I find, and maybe this is just a getting older thing, but it's like, if I don't love it, I don't need it anymore. You know, I don't need to keep moving it around and dusting it. So she's been, especially like under stressful times like quarantine, if I'm feeling really agitated, I'll go tidy up a drawer and I just feel better. So
yes, I deleted my entire email inbox yesterday, which was 5,736, and I felt amazing.
You feel like a new person.
I didn't even care. I just threw caution to the wind. Another silly question that I have here is, what's one thing that you do not like that most people love? I'll go ahead and say mine. Everybody knows it. I'm not a big fan of going to the movies. I'm really not a fan of watching movies much. You know, I'll go because of the popcorn, but, you know, I don't want to sit there for 3.5 hours.
You know, my beloved grandma was just like that. She did not want to go to the movies.
No, I sit there. It's a 3.5, 4 hours. It's stuff. I'm done. You know, I could be knitting and it's dark in there and I can't see.
Gosh, I'm having a hard time with that one.
I love the core of a cabbage. Chew on a core of a cabbage. Most people don't like that.
Most people don't like that, yeah. Or haven't tried it. Maybe it's just they haven't tried it.
There you go. It's umami. Maybe if I tell them that, they'll.
I'm kind of a contrarian, so this should be easy for me to answer, because like I very often don't like something that everybody else likes. Like a lot of like this is a contrarian thing. I may end up liking these things, but like when everybody was watching Mad Men, and Anne Shane, she never steers me wrong. If Anne likes something, I will always, when I do experience it, almost always like it. And so Anne and everybody else was telling me, Mad Men, it's the greatest thing ever. And there's something in me that won't watch those things. I watch them like 5 years later, 10 years later, Breaking Bad.
My sister, I have never seen Titanic. I've never, ever seen Titanic, ever. So
yeah, so I mean, I guess that would, you know, those kind of viral things, like even like in New York City in the 90s, you'd go to work the day after Seinfeld aired, you know, and everybody had watched Seinfeld and was making jokes based on Seinfeld. And it wasn't that I didn't like Seinfeld, I just won't do it when
mainstream, right? I don't like to be mainstream.
You know, I've watched it all since then. I've watched all of the.
We have another question. It says, during your Vogue Live interview, by the way, I enjoyed you on Sunday. This was a different one that you did during Vogue Live. You were knitting dishcloths. Is this something you do for relaxation?
You know, I had a period when we were writing the first book, which has this dishcloth pattern in it, where I was knitting them all the time, and I'm no exaggeration, I must have knit like 100 of them. They're really good. Like at that time I had little kids, and all the time that you spend with little kids, just they're busy and you can't leave them alone, but there's nothing for you to do. So like at the beach, I'd be knitting a dish rag, you know.
What's your favorite cotton for that?
I used to use this cotton that they sell at the craft stores called Peaches and Cream.
Oh yeah.
And they don't make that anymore, but that's the yarn that we called for in our book. There's still a brand at like Michael's and stuff that's like it.
Lily and Cream.
Yeah. And now I'm a fancy lady, and we sell Rowan in our shop, so I make him in Rowan hand knit cotton.
Uh-huh.
You want to see my list? I'm going to show you my
Yes.
sweatpants again.
Please.
So with the quarantine, I had a new blossoming of dish rag knitting.
Look at that, guys. Oh my gosh. And I'm one of these people that actually uses them. You know, I have a whole drawer for those things.
I have a bunch of them in my drawer, so this isn't all that I've knit during the quarantine, but I decided that I was just going to stack them up as like a visual quarantine diary. So during all of our meetings, I've been knitting these until I'm actually out of all my own hand knit cotton supplies. I used to buy old Rowan kits on eBay, just for all the discontinued colors of hand knit cotton. And I decided I'm not going to go into that because it's a special treasure and I shouldn't use it on dishcloths. But that's the only thing that stopped me.
Let's see them. Are they all the same pattern?
They're all the same pattern. They're the ball band dishcloth. It's a classic.
Oh, nice.
And
for those of you, especially Paige, if you can hear me, that are new to knitting, little dishcloths like this are the best way to just sort of learn a new technique, I always say a lot of my dishcloths are pattern repeats I want to learn or something. So they're just odd looking, but they work.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
In field guide number 4, the log cabin field guide, we teach you every technique that you need to know to do log cabin, but we teach them in the format of dishcloths. So there's 6 dishcloths, and each one is like a different arrangement of the log cabin.
There's a lady up here, Stephanie, that made us a log cabin dishcloth one time for a party we had, and that was nice. Also, I guess we're closing in on 2 o'clock, but I have just a couple more quick questions because everybody wants to know what you're working on now, of course. What's your work in progress?
This is a great opportunity to talk about field guide number 14. This is something called the trellis top, which is, it has buttons down the side, and I'm still trying to decide how many buttons or if I'm going to not have buttons.
Well, I want you to have a good laugh at me, okay? Because I'm going through the book today. I'm talking to Lauren. Lauren is the, Girl Friday you saw. And I'm reading about this trellis top because I love it. I can see it, how many different ways you can wear it. An easy piece for, an intermediate. And so I was reading online about the story behind it, and I came upon a word I had never seen before. What was it again, Lauren? Yeah, tabard, but I didn't call it that. I call it tabard. And I said, Lauren, what in the hell is a tabard?
You must just be too young to know what a tabard is.
Oh, she's younger than me. He said, it's a tabard, you silly, and here's what it is. And I thought, oh, this is going to be the Tennessee to New York City moment. They're going to be
if you were,
I told on myself anyway.
If you were in high school in the 1970s, as I was, there was this whole thing with tabards. Like it was just like a fad, and they looked terrible on everybody. They were like not a poncho and not a sweater and just this kind of square thing. Mm-hmm. And so when we saw this thing, we were like, oh my God, it's a tabard. But
thank you for that. I learned something that my vocabulary has been increased due to you guys.
Well, one thing that Ann and I feel like we're doing is we're keeping the language, the old-timey language alive for the young people, because we both still say things like, we have a staff that's mostly, women in their probably early 30s. And one time we said just in casual conversation, we said, well, it's a pig and a poke. And one of them said, what does that mean? And I was like, you don't know what a pig and a poke is? And then I realized, I must have heard that from my grandmother, who was born in 1896, but I'm still saying it, I still say a lot of things that she said.
I'm in my 40s, but yes, I totally, it gets you. And when she said Monty Python, that's when I know exactly what that.
Yeah, they were big wearing the tabards in The Life of Brian.
Now, what color of the Nua are you using for that?
Oh, you would ask me that. I think, is there one called Granite?
Yes, I was almost going to order the
Or no, or
flamingo one.
Summer Storms. Is it called Summer
Yeah.
Storms?
Mm-hmm.
It's the one that's, in New York City, this is called a pop of charcoal. This is a color in New York City because we tend to wear a lot of black.
See, guys, see the nice buttons.
See why we laughed about it being a tabard.
Yes. I'm looking at the flamingo, which is the sort of fuchsia colorway. Now,
Yeah.
another question, and I know it's right at 2, and I'm not going to keep you much longer, but I'm fascinated to know, Carol Feller, this yarn, is this a new venture for her? Has she had yarns for a while?
She's had yarns for quite a while, but it's just these 2 yarns. And
Yeah. Because I'd actually never heard of this yarn until I got this book.
Definitely,
so I'm fascinated about it
saw
now.
her when we were first starting out. The first time we went to TNNA, she was showing, that's the National Needlework Association.
Oh yes, I've been, which is the longer thing now.
I know. Yeah. Another casualty for June.
Yeah.
But that was where we first saw her yarn, and I think that was where we first met her.
Yeah. But I'm going to order some because I'm fascinated by it. The price point is decent for the, what you're getting as far as the fiber content is. It's alpaca, and I had it here.
It's yak, merino. It's mostly merino, and then the other half is yak and linen.
I messed it all together, but it sounds very fascinating. Yak.
Really, I mean, we're getting great feedback on it. People seem to really like it. It's got more drape than a regular wool, which I think we could all use a little more drape.
Yes, we do very well here in the South with linen and linen blends. Our ladies don't normally like cotton so much, but you mix it with linen, then all of a sudden it's magical. Linen is the magic fabric here.
Cotton is just almost, it's absorbent to a fault.
Mm-hmm.
It just, it weighs you down a little bit.
Okay, here's one from Amanda. What is your most loved finished knitting project and your most embarrassing finished object?
Oh, embarrassing.
I have a few. I knitted a uterus one time.
Oh really?
I did.
What got into you? I know the pattern, so I.
Oh, you know the uterus pattern? No kidding.
Oh yeah, like they were.
I had a hysterectomy, and so
it was.
I gave it to my gynecologist. She thought it was a hoot.
I can't even think what my most. I'm not easily embarrassed. I guess that's part of the problem. But I've had so many, knitting fails in public because I feel like I feel like they're funny, so I always want to talk about them.
Mm-hmm. Another one of my favorites is when I pull out when people don't want to do a gauge swatch. Right, a sweater that I made that is about 4 feet wide and 2 feet long.
I still do that. I mean, I'm better at guessing how far off I am.
You guys missed on Sunday too. She didn't do a gauge swatch. She had to start all over again.
Yeah, my first gauge swatch for this thing is right here. And this is, I mean, I don't know if you can get a sense of how much too big this is, but it won't even fit in the screen. But this was going to be how wide my tabard was. So I decided to start over. But
about your favorite.
The other one, the thing that I love the most, that I've, it's the log cabin. It was the first thing I say I designed it, but in the sense that I copied a quilt, one of the G's Ben quilts from Alabama. I copied it in knitting. It was a fabric quilt, and it's called Courthouse Steps, and it's in our very first book. And I made it in Rowan denim, which is discontinued, which sucks. And I made it, how long ago? Like 15 years ago, and I was so excited the whole time I was knitting that because I was so inspired by the quilt. And it's like I always tell people, if the house is on fire, that's what I'm grabbing.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I didn't really fully understand log cabin at the time, so it's a little bit wonky. It's not perfectly square. And it's got a lot of sun damage on it because denim fades, and if you keep it folded at the bottom of your son's bed for a number of years, it will have lines where it's been folded, and I love all of those things about it. So, and it feels like
That's
silk.
beautiful.
It's so well worn.
Does he have it, or do you still have it?
Well, he's not totally out of the house. He's a college student. So I think I'm going to keep it as a relic of his childhood. It really makes me happy though, because he's 21 now, and every once in a while I'll walk into the kitchen and he'll be like making coffee in the morning, and he'll have that around his shoulders, you know.
Oh,
and I'll
yes.
just be like, ah.
Be still my heart. Oh my God.
I mean, that's when, you know, like very few projects turn out to be both a great thing to knit and then a truly great thing in your life, you know. Like every time I start a knitting project, I'm like, that's how I feel about it when I'm starting it. And then, you know, they take on a life of their own after they're
Baby
done.
blankets are that way for me. I don't enjoy making them, but what happens to them afterwards is beautiful, right?
It's so beautiful. I mean, and also just the fact that somebody is wrapping their baby in my knitting is very meaningful to me.
So thank you so
It's been so fun.
Really, we can't thank you enough. They would thank you if I would let them speak.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I'll see you all on the internet. Come and see us at Mason Dixon Knitting. We'd love it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye, Cristi. Thank you.